Chapters 3 to 6 of Book 11 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Melo. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 11. The Atom Fraternizes with the Hurricane. Chapter 3. Just Indignation of a Hairdresser. The worthy hairdresser, who had chased from his shop the two little fellows to whom Gavroche had opened the paternal interior of the elephant, was at that moment in his shop, engaged in shaving an old soldier of the Legion who had served under the Empire. They were talking. The hairdresser had, naturally, spoken to the veteran of the riot, then of General Lamarque, and from Lamarque they had passed to the Emperor. Thence sprang up a conversation between barber and soldier, which Prudhomme, had he been present, would have enriched with arabesques, and which he would have entitled Dialogue between the Razor and the Sword. "How did the Emperor ride, sir?" said the barber. "Badly. He did not know how to fall, so he never fell." "Did he have fine horses? He must have had fine horses." "On the day when he gave me my cross, I noticed his beast. It was a racing mare, perfectly white. Her ears were very wide apart, her saddle deep, a fine head marked with a black star, a very long neck, strongly articulated knees, prominent ribs, oblique shoulders, and a powerful crupper. A little more than 15 hands in height." "A pretty horse," remarked the hairdresser. "It was His Majesty's beast." The hairdresser felt that after this observation a short silence would be fitting, so he conformed himself to it, and then went on. "The Emperor was never wounded but once, was he, sir?" The old soldier replied with the calm and sovereign tone of a man who had been there. "In the heel, at Ratisbon. I never saw him so well dressed as on that day. He was as neat as a new sou." "And you, Mr. Veteran? You must have been often wounded?" "I?" said the soldier. "Ah, not to amount to anything. At Marengo I received 2 sabre blows to the back of my neck, a bullet in the right arm at Austerlitz, another in the left hip at Jena. At Friedland, a thrust from a bayonet there. At the Moskowa, 7 or 8 lance thrusts, no matter where. At Lutzen, a splinter of a shell crushed one of my fingers. Ah, and then at Waterloo, a ball from a Bassayan in the thigh, that's all." "How fine that is!" exclaimed the hairdresser, in Pindaric accents. "To die on the field of battle! On my word of honor, rather than die in bed, of an illness, slowly, a bit by bit each day, with drugs, cataplasms, syringes, medicines, I should prefer to receive a cannon ball in my belly." "You're not over fastidious?" said the soldier. He had hardly spoken when a fearful crash shook the shop. The show window had suddenly been fractured. The wig-maker turned pale. "Ah, good God!" he exclaimed. "It's one of them!" "What?" "A cannon ball!" "Here it is," said the soldier, and he picked up something that was rolling about the floor. It was a pebble. The hairdresser ran to the broken window and beheld Gavroche fleeing at the full speed towards the Marché Saint-Jean. As he passed the hairdresser's shop, Gavroche, who had the 2 brats still in his mind, had not been able to resist the impulse to say good day to him, and had flung a stone through his panes. "You see!" shrieked the hairdresser, who from white had turned blue, "that fellow returns and does mischief for the pure pleasure of it. What has anyone done to that gamin?" Chapter 4. The child is amazed at the old man. In the meantime, in the Marché Saint-Jean, where the post had already been disarmed, Gavroche had just effected a junction with a band led by Enjolras, Courfeyrac, Combeferre, and Feuillet. They were armed after a fashion. Bahorel and Jean Prouvaire had found them and swelled the group. Enjolras had a double-barreled hunting gun, Combeferre the gun of a National Guard bearing the number of his legion, and in his belt 2 pistols which his unbuttoned coat allowed to be seen. Jean Prouvaire an old cavalry musket, Bahorel a rifle. Courfeyrac was brandishing an unsheathed sword cane. Feuillet, with a naked sword in his hand, marched at their head, shouting, "Long live Poland!" They reached the Quai Morland, cravateless, hatless, breathless, soaked by the rain, with lightning in their eyes. Gavroche accosted them calmly. "Where are we going?" "Come along," said Courfeyrac. Behind Feuillet marched, or rather bounded, Bahorel, who was like a fish in water in a riot. He wore a scarlet waistcoat, and indulged in the sort of words which break everything. His waistcoat astounded a passer-by, who cried in bewilderment, "Here are the Reds!" "The Reds! The Reds!" retorted Bahorel. "A queer kind of fear, bourgeois. For my part, I don't tremble before a poppy. The little red hat inspires me with no alarm. Take my advice, bourgeois. Let's leave fear of the red to horned cattle." He caught sight of a corner of the wall on which was placarded the most peaceable sheet of paper in the world, a permission to eat eggs, a Lenten admonition addressed by the Archbishop of Paris to his flock. Bahorel exclaimed, "Flock? A polite way of saying geese." And he tore the charge from the nail. This conquered Gavroche. From that instant, Gavroche set himself to study Bahorel. "Bahorel," observed Enjolras, "you are wrong. You should have let that charge alone. He is not the person with whom we have to deal. You are wasting your wrath to no purpose. Take care of your supply. One does not fire out of the ranks with the soul any more than with a gun." "Each one in his own fashion, Enjolras," retorted Bahorel. "This bishop's prose shocks me. I want to eat eggs without being permitted. Your style is the hot and cold. I am amusing myself. Besides, I'm not wasting myself, I'm getting a start, and if I tore down that charge, Hercle, 'twas only to whet my appetite." This word, Hercle, struck Gavroche. He sought out all occasions for learning, and that tearer down of posters possessed his esteem. He inquired of him, "What does Hercle mean?" Bahorel answered, "It means cursed name of a dog, in Latin." Here Bahorel recognized at a window a pale young man with a black beard who was watching them as they passed, probably a friend of the ABC. He shouted to him, "Quick, cartridges, parabellum!" "A fine man, that's true," said Gavroche, who now understood Latin. A tumultuous retinue accompanied them. Students, artists, young men affiliated to the Cougourde Ouvrier, artisans, longshoremen, armed with clubs and bayonets. Some, like Combeferre, with pistols thrust into their trousers. An old man, who appeared to be extremely aged, was walking in the band. He had no arms, and he made great haste, so that he might not be left behind, although he had a thoughtful air. Gavroche caught sight of him. "Qu'est-ce que ça?" said he to Courfeyrac. "He's an old duffer." It was Monsieur Mabeuf. Chapter 5. The Old Man. Let us recount what has taken place. Enjolras and his friends had been on the Boulevard Bourdon, near the public storehouses, at the moment when the dragoons had made their charge. Enjolras, Courfeyrac, and Combeferre were among those who had taken to the Rue Bassompierre, shouting, "To the barricades!" In the Rue Lesdiguières, they had met an old man walking along. What had attracted their attention was that the good man was walking in a zigzag, as though he were intoxicated.